and amara ina haifa tēnā koutou, tēnā katoa. Thank you for that embarrassingly long introduction. And thank you all for coming. I know there are plenty of competing demands on your time on a Tuesday night. There's an international professorial lecture next door if you wish to vacate here after a few minutes. But I'm very humbled to be standing in front of you to begin some sort of ongoing reflection about the massacre, the terrible massacre that took place 1 month ago. And I feel very humble because I know that in the room there are at least 120 different, equally wise responses to that disaster. And so whatever I can say, oh, there's my grandchildren, so there's the future. That's the future. So whatever I can say has to be tempered with the knowledge that you also have your own wisdom on how you might respond to this calamity. And at one level, I mean, the only way we can respond is with love and with care and with compassion and with kindness and for making ourselves all a lot more sensitive and open to others in the face of this appalling incident. So the preventable, I want to kind of paraphrase John Donne, the preventable death of every one of us diminishes all of us. The massacres have kind of, challenged our common humanity. The 50 people killed had a right to live long and full lives. The spontaneous outpouring of grief and solidarity of the past months have been a profound acknowledgement of our interdependence and a deep recognition that the harm done to our Muslim brothers and sisters or anyone diminishes all of us. 1 month on and the wounds are still open and the long-term healing has only just begun and remains unfinished. And out of this violence, it's absolutely essential that we're more intentional about making Aotearoa New Zealand a more peaceful and non-violent space. And already, out of the chaos and out of the crisis, which is, as the Chinese tell us, danger and opportunity, we managed to get, the abolition of a whole variety of weapons, military-style semi-automatic weapons, and other automatic weapons, which we've been agitating for 21 years. So you can see that good can come out of profound evil.
Excuse me, Kevin. Could you possibly use the microphone?
I thought it was. Hello, can you hear me?
Is it switched on?
Is it switched on? Is that right?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sorry, okay.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. Can you hear me now? Is that all right? Good on my chin. Is that all right? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. And it's also critical that we build deep and abiding human solidarity with all that live on these islands and any ethnic or religious group that chooses to come here. There's no room in the 21st century New Zealand for passive bystanders, silence in the face of intolerance. This is the moment for us to centre and respond to Muslim needs, interests and agendas while working for peace with justice in all of our relationships, in all of our groups and in all of our institutions. So this lecture and my extremely inadequate words are an attempt to understand something of the sources of this tragedy, how we might prevent such calamities in the future, and what role peace researchers, peace practitioners, and all of us might play to ensure that this never happens again. In the face of trauma, and we need to kind of ask for a quest for wholeness. My mentor, Adam Curl, said, peacemaking is the art of seeing that things which seem apart are in fact connected. It's a quest for unifiers and creative capacity to control negative dividers. And so in the face of this appalling calamity, what is it that unites us? What is it that divides us? And even the things that divide us, we have to begin discerning some connection to. Whether we like it or not, and I'm going to be kind of highlighting some rather appalling parts of the underbelly of New Zealand society and culture, we can't disown our compatriots who have very different views of the world, who are intolerant, who are racist, who are prejudiced. They have as much right to be here as those of us who are cosmopolitan, liberal, enlightened, and tolerant. And so how do we, in all of this work, how do we begin making sure that our connections to each other are as open and as honest and as vulnerable as we can make them? Pastor Haval, who knew a lot about suffering, said we mustn't be ashamed that we're capable of love, friendship, solidarity, sympathy and tolerance, but just the opposite. We must set these fundamental dimensions of humanity free from their private exile and accept them as the only genuine starting point of meaningful human community. And in all of this, it's really critical that we focus on hope and the sources of hopefulness and optimism. Because without hope, we will certainly perish. And without hope, we will not be able to be very effective in standing in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters, or anyone else that is suffering at the hands of those who are perpetrating violence. Gandhi said, "When in despair, I will remember that all through history the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall." We've got to remember that in relation to the United States right now. Hans Rosling is another person. He's the statistician who's trying to highlight the ways in which the world is getting better. And indeed, if you look at things like infant mortality and gender-based violence and tolerance and prejudice and so forth, all of these different things are getting better. And he says, "I am a possibilist, someone who neither hopes without reason nor fears without reason. I see all this progress, and it fills me with conviction and hope that further progress is possible. This is not optimistic, it's having a worldview that's constructive and useful." So I want us to kind of focus on what it is that's constructive and useful in the way in which we respond to this massacre, in the way in which we respond to tragedy. Unfortunately, having all of those positives in mind, we're confronted by a dystopian present. We've got many challenges which can't be resolved within states. They're all going to require collaborative problem solving, and that's a distinct premium at the moment. Climate change is the major existential challenge that all of us are facing. And when I was talking to a colleague of mine who's a psychotherapist in America on Saturday about, what could I say? She said, well, in the face of climate change and all the other existential threats, there is one solution which people look for, and that's to search for a big daddy. A father figure who can turn these complex problems into simple ones. And that is something, I think, which we have to really avoid and counteract. We've got negative globalization, war, refugees, economic vulnerability, national security states, and high levels of alienation from political processes and political institutions. And one of the things I want to also reiterate is that it's absolutely vital here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that we don't respond to this calamity with more national security. We don't need more and more surveillance. We don't need more and more armed police. We don't need to expand the military. We don't need to do any of those things, because the answers don't lie with the state. They lie with all of the citizens and the ways in which we connect with each other. So we're also confronted too by a new phenomenon, the popularity of celebrity, and I'm going to enable those neo-fascist political leaders and movements. Trump, Duterte, Putin, El-Sisi, Erdogan, Orban, etc. These are the people who gave the Christchurch perpetrator some of his motivation. They're the people who appear in his manifesto. They're the people who give him solace and support as he embarked on murderous intent. And these challenges aren't north-south challenges anymore, they're global problems. And they have an impact on all of us. They're also connected, and they're the contextual backdrop to individual mass murder and state-sponsored mass murder. And there are very deep and profound links between Trump, Brexit, right-wing white extremism, and mass murder. And I want to, and so a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is really going to focus on white male supremacists. Just to kind of remind us about what is mass murder. Mass murder is war. The Holocaust was mass murder. Hiroshima was mass murder. 20th century genocide and violent revolutions are mass murder. ISIS and Al-Qaeda engaged in mass murder. Between 136 million and 148 million people were killed in the wars of the 20th century. A total of 85 million people were killed in the different convulsions in China. When you start adding all of these things together, we're a murderous breed. Margaret Drabble said the 21st century was a beastly century for violence. Mass shootings are much more low-key. They're defined as a shooting event having 4 or more victims, but don't include slaying, which involve the death of multiple family members, or gang killings. I'm not quite sure why they're excluded. And hate crime, which also lies behind these murders, are criminal offences against people or property motivated in whole or part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. And that's the poison that these murders have highlighted. The way in which we directly and indirectly create permissive environments for hate speech, for bias, for prejudice, and for active discrimination. I just looked at the 10 deadliest murders over the past, mass murders over the past 20 years, and New Zealand now ranks number 8 in the top 10. So we're now up there. We have lost our innocence. This was a moment of calamity. In terms of mass shootings, I don't need to go through this anymore, but there's been the Southern Poverty Law Centre, which is a great resource if you want to look at any of this stuff, shows that a 50% increase in total white nationalist groups in 2018, with a huge jump in hate crime since the election of Trump, 1,482 in 2018 on. These are serious hate crimes, people making death threats and so forth. And there were 40 people last year killed in white radical, right-wing terrorist attacks in the US. So what are some of the drivers of murderous extremism? Some of these drivers are, this is a distillation of a range of different studies that I looked at. The first is the desire for identity and belonging. Many of these murderers are looking for an identity that is bigger than themselves because their own identities are shallow and inadequate, or they feel they're shallow and inadequate. They never ask for their opinion. They don't belong anywhere in particular. Violent masculinity and hypermasculinity has a huge part to play in the identification of somebody who's going to be murderous.